my friends, welcome back. So last time I wore my Union kepi. I never was a Confederate reenactor or living historian, so I don't have any Confederate hats. I have this one though from when me and my buddies, both Nick and Josh. Oh, that just showed my hairline bad. When Nick and Josh and I went to Gettysburg, I actually got this just because I really liked how it looked. But so today we're actually going to be discussing Robert E. Lee's battle report. Like I said about the other day, I believe Monday, about the difference. So, completely different reports. So, Meade's is very short. Meade is a first-time Army commander, so he's pretty much writing it from the perspective of a former, not even really corps commander, more of like division commander. Meade had only recently at Chancellorsville been promoted to a corps commander. So it was a very new world for him. Lee, on the other hand, was already the Army commander for some time, and he had been doing it for some time. So his is much longer, as you see from the size of this video. So just bear with me. Again, we're going to do it the same way. The whole point of this video is just to see their perspectives. I will tell you, though, there is going to be a big chunk I'm taking away from the report, just so that I am being transparent. I'm pretty much taking away all the parts about Jeb Stuart. I'm going to explain it's going to have the first part of it. It's just a really long explanation. So it just felt easier doing it this way just because it's already a long video. And it would have been like 12 more paragraphs if I included everything about Jeb Stuart. But this is going to be mainly about the opening of the battle and then the subsequent end of the battle. And then it's going to finish off with Lee pretty much explaining everything. You're going to notice Lee doesn't actually give casualties. He defers that to his subordinates. One of these days, I'm going to try to convince my brother to give me the officer's report, and maybe we could do a cool series about that. But at this moment, he will not hand those books over to me because they're originals, and I think he loves those more than he loves his family, including his wife and child. But with that said, let's get into it. Headquarters, Army of Northern Virginia, January 20th, 1864. General S. Cooper, Adjutant and Inspector General, Richmond, Virginia. General, I forward today my report on the late campaign of this army in the Maryland and Pennsylvania, together with those of the Corps and other commanders as far as they have been received. General Longstreet's list of casualties and the report of his subordinate officers shall be sent as soon as they can be obtained from him. I also forward the report of medical director and some other documents mentioned in the accompanying schedule. With reference to the former, I would remark that it is necessarily imperfect, for reasons stated in my report. The actual casualties and number of missing can only be learned from the reports of commanding officers, and it should be borne in the mind that they have usually embraced all slightly wounded, even such as remained on duty, under the impression, commonly entertained, that the loss sustained is a measure of service performed and the danger incurred. I also enclose a map of the routes of the army and one of lines at Hagerstown and Williamsport. That of the battlefield of Gettysburg shall be forwarded as soon as completed. Very respectfully, your obedient servant, R. E. Lee, General. Battle of Gettysburg. Hill's Corps was accordingly ordered to move towards Cashtown on the 29th, and Longstreet to follow the next day, leaving Pickett's division at Chambersburg to guard the rear until relieved by Imboden. General Ewell was recalled from Carlisle and directed to join the army at Cashtown or Gettysburg as circumstances might require. The advance of the enemy to the latter place was unknown, and the weather being inclement, the march was conducted with a view to the comfort of the troops. Heath's division reached Cashtown on the 29th, and the following morning Pettigrew's brigade, sent by General Heath to procure supplies at Gettysburg, found it occupied by the enemy. Being ignorant of the extent of his force, General Pettigrew was unwilling to hazard an attack with his single brigade and return to Cashtown. General Hill arrived with Pender's division in the evening, and the following morning, July the 1st, advanced with these two divisions accompanied by Pegram's and McIntosh's battalions of artillery to ascertain the strength of the enemy, whose force was supposed to consist chiefly of cavalry. The leading division under Henry Heath found the enemy's vedettes about 3 miles west of Gettysburg, and continued to advance until within a mile of the town. When 2 brigades were sent forward to reconnoiter, they drove into the advance of the enemy very gallantly, but subsequently encountered large superior numbers, and were compelled to retire with loss. Brigadier General Archer commanded one of the brigades, being encountered taken prisoner. General Heath then prepared for action as soon as Pender arrived to support him. Was ordered by General Hill to advance. The artillery was placed in position, and the engagement opened with vigor. General Heath pressed the enemy steadily back, breaking his first and second lines and attacking his third, and with great resolution. About 2:30 p.m., the advance of Ewell's corps, consisting of Rhodes' division with Carter's battalion of artillery, arrived by the Middletown road, and Foreman, on Heath's left, nearly at right angles with his line, became warmly engaged with fresh numbers of the enemy. Heath's troops, having suffered heavily in their protracted contested with a superior force, were relieved by Pender's and Early, coming up from the Heidelberg road soon afterwards, took position on the left of Rhodes when a general advance was made. The enemy gave way on all sides and was driven through Gettysburg with great loss. Major General Reynolds, who was in command, was killed. More than 5,000 prisoners, exclusive of a large number of wounded. 3 pieces of artillery and several colors were captured. Among the prisoners were 2 brigadier generals, one of whom was badly wounded. Our own losses were heavy, including a number of officers, among whom were Major General Heath, slightly, and Brigadier General Scales of Pender's division, severely wounded. The enemy retired to range of hills south of Gettysburg, where he displayed a strong force of infantry and artillery. It was ascertained from the prisoners that we had been engaged with 2 corps of the army formerly commanded by General Hooker, and that the remainder of the army, now under General Meade, was approaching Gettysburg without information as to its proximity. The strong position which the enemy had assumed could not be attacked without danger of exposing the 4 divisions present, already weakened and exhausted by a long and bloody struggle, to overwhelmingly number of fresh troops. General Ewell was therefore instructed to carry the hill occupied by the enemy if he found it practical, but to avoid a general engagement until the arrival of other divisions of the army, which were ordered to hasten forward. He decided to await Johnson's division, which had marched from Carlisle by road west of the mountains to guard the trains of his corps, and consequently did not reach Gettysburg until a late hour. In the meantime, the enemy occupied the point which General Ewell designed to seize, but in what force could not be ascertained owing to the darkness. An intercepted dispatch showed that another corps had halted that afternoon 4 miles from Gettysburg. Under these circumstances, it was decided not to attack until the arrival of Longstreet, 2 of whose divisions, those of Hood and McLaws, encamped about 4 miles in the rear during the night. Anderson's division of Hill's corps came up after the engagement. It had not been intended to deliver a general battle so far from our base unless attacked by coming unexpectedly upon the whole Federal army. To withdraw through the mountains with our extensive trains would have been difficult and dangerous. At the same time, we were unable to await an attack, as the country was unfavorable for collecting supplies in the presence of the enemy, who could restrain our foraging parties by holding the mountain passes with local and other troops. A battle had, therefore, become in a measure unavoidable, and a success already gained gave hope of a favorable issue. The enemy occupied a high strong position with his right upon two commanding elevations adjacent to each other, one southeast and the other known as Cemetery Hill, immediately south of the town which lay at its base. His line extended thence upon the high ground along the Emmitsburg Road with a steep ridge in the rear, which was also occupied. The ridge was difficult of ascent, particularly the two hills above mentioned as forming its northern extremity, and a third at the other end, on which the enemy's left rested. Numerous stone and rail fences along the slope served to affordable protection to his troops and impede our advance. In front, the ground was undulating and generally open for 3/4 of a mile. General Ewell's corps constituted our left, Johnston's division being opposite the heights adjoining Cemetery Hill, Early's in the center, in front of the north face of the latter, and Rhodes up on his right. Hill's corps would face the western side of Cemetery Hill and extend nearly parallel to the Emmitsburg Road, making an angle with Ewell's. Pender's division formed his left, Anderson to his right, Heath under Brigadier General Pettigrew being in reserve. His artillery under Colonel Walker was posted in eligible positions along his line. It was determined to make the principal attack upon the enemy's left and endeavor to gain a position from which it was thought our artillery could be brought to bear with effect. Longstreet was directed to place the division of McLaws and Hood on the right of the hill, particularly enveloping the enemy's left, which he was to drive in. General Hill was ordered to threaten the enemy's center, to prevent reinforcements from being drawn to either wing, and cooperate with his right division in Longstreet's attack. General Ewell was instructed to make a simultaneous demonstration upon the enemy's right, to be converted into a real attack should opportunity offer. About 4 p.m., Longstreet's batteries opened fire, and soon afterwards Hood's division on the extreme right moved to attack. McLaws followed somewhat 4 of Anderson's brigades, those of Wilcox, Perry, Wright, and Posey supporting him on the left, in the order named. The enemy was soon driven from his position on the Emmitsburg Road to cover a ravine and a line of stone fences at the foot of the ridge in his rear. He was dislodged from these after a severe struggle and retired up the ridge, leaving a number of his batteries in our possession. Wilcox and Wright's brigades advanced with great gallantry, breaking successive lines of the enemy's infantry and compelling him to abandon much of his artillery. Wilcox reached the foot and Wright gained the crest of the ridge itself, driving the enemy down the opposite side. But having become separated from McLaws and gone beyond the other 2 brigades of the division, they were attacked in the front and on both flanks, and compelled to retire, being unable to bring off any of the captured artillery. McLaws' left also fell back, and it being now nearly dark, General Longstreet determined to await the arrival of General Pickett. He disposed his command to hold the ground gained on the right, withdrawing his left to the first position from which the enemy had been driven. 4 pieces of artillery, several hundred prisoners, and 2 regimental flags were taken. As soon as the engagement began on our right, General Johnson opened with his artillery, and about 2 hours later advanced up the hill next to Cemetery Hill, with 3 brigades, the 4th being detained by a demonstration on his left. Soon afterwards, General Early attacked Cemetery Hill, with 2 brigades supported by a 3rd and 4th having been previously detached. The enemy had greatly increased by earthworks and strength of the position assailed by Johnston and Early. The troops of the former moved steadily up the steep and rugged ascent, under a heavy fire, driving the enemy into his entrenchments, parts which were carried by Stewart's brigade, and a number of prisoners taken. The contest was continued to a late hour, but without further advantage. On Cemetery Hill, the attack of Early's leading brigades, those of Hayes and Hoke, under Colonel Avery, was made with vigor. 2 lines of the enemy infantry were dislodged from cover of some stones and board fences on the side of the ascent, and driven back into the works on the crest, into which the troops forced their way and seized several pieces of artillery. A heavy force advanced against their right, which was without support, and they were compelled to retire, bringing with them about 100 prisoners and 4 stands of colors. General Ewell had directed General Rhodes to attack in concert with Early, covering his right, and had requested Brigadier General Lane, then commanding Pender's division, to cooperate on the right of Rhodes. When the time to attack arrived, General Rhodes, not having his troops in position, was unprepared to cooperate with General Early, and before he could get in readiness, the latter had been obliged to retire for want of the expected support on his right. General Lane was prepared to give his assistance required of him, and so informed General Rhodes, but the latter deemed it useless to advance after the failure of Early's attack. In this engagement, our loss in men and officers was large. Major General Hoods and Pender, Brigadier General Jones, Semmes, G.T. Anderson, and Barksdale, and Colonel Avery, commanding Hoke's brigade, were wounded, the last 2 mortally. General Pender and Semmes died after their removal to Virginia. The result of this day's operation induced the belief that, with proper concert of action and with increased support, the position gained on the right would enable the artillery to render an assault in columns. We should ultimately succeed, and it would accordingly determine to continue the attack. The general plan was unchanged. Longstreet, reinforced by pickets, 3 brigades, which arrived near the battlefield during the afternoon of the 2nd, was ordered to attack the next morning. And General Ewell was directed to assail the enemy's right at the same time. The latter, during the night, reinforced General Johnson with 2 brigades from Rhodes and 1 from Early's division. General Longstreet's deposition was not completed as early as expected, but before notice could be sent to General Ewell, General Johnson had already become engaged, and it was too late to recall him. The enemy attempted to recover the works taken the preceding evening, but was repulsed, and Johnson attacked in return. After a gallant and prolonged struggle in which the enemy was forced to abandon part of his entrenchments, General Johnson found himself unable to carry the strong fortified crest of the hill. The projected attack on the enemy's left not having been made, he was enabled to hold his right with a force largely superior to that of General Johnson, and finally to threaten his flank and rear, rendering it necessary for him to retire to his original position at about 1 p.m. General Longstreet was delayed by a force occupying the high, rocky hills on the enemy's extreme left, from which his troops could be attacked in reverse as they advanced. His operations had been embarrassed the day previous by the same cause, and he now deemed it necessary to defend his flank and rear with the divisions of Hood and McLaws. He was therefore reinforced by Heath's division. 2 brigades of Pender's to the command of Major General Tremble was assigned. General Hill was directed to hold his line with the rest of his command, afford General Longstreet's further assistance if required, and avail himself of any success that might be gained. A careful examination was made of the ground secured by Longstreet and the batteries placed in position, which it was believed would enable them to silence those of the enemy. Hill's artillery and Paul Ewell's was ordered to open simultaneously, and the assaulting column to advance under cover of combined fire of the 3. The batteries were directed to push forward as the infantry progressed, protect their flanks, and support their attacks closely. At about 1 p.m., at a given signal, a heavy cannonade was opened and continued for about 2 hours with marked effect upon the enemy. His batteries replied vigorously at first, but towards their close their fire slackened perceptibly, and General Longstreet ordered forward the column of the attack, consisting of Pickett and Heath's divisions in 2 lines. Pickett on the right, Wilcox's brigade marched in the rear of Pickett's right to guard that flank, and Heath was supported by Lane and Scally's brigade under General Tremble. The troops moved steadily on, under a heavy fire of musketry and artillery, the main attack being directed against the enemy's left center. His batteries reopened as soon as they appeared. our own having nearly exhausted their ammunitions in the protracted cannonade that preceded the advance of the infantry, were unable to reply or render necessary support to the attacking party. Owing to this fact, which was unknown to me when the assault took place, the enemy was unable to throw a strong force of infantry against our left, already wavering under a concentrated fire of artillery from the ridge in front and from Cemetery Hill on the left. It finally gave way the right after penetrating the enemy's line, entering his advance works, and capturing some of his artillery. Was attacked simultaneously in front on both flanks and driven back with heavy loss. The troops were rallied and reformed. The enemy did not pursue. A large number of brave officers and men fell or were captured on this occasion. Of Pickett's 3 brigade commanders, General Armistead and Garnett were killed, and General Kemper dangerously wounded. Major General Tremble and Brigadier General Pettigrew were also wounded, the former severely. The movement of the army preceding the Battle of Gettysburg had been much embarrassed by the absence of cavalry. As soon as it was known the enemy had crossed into Maryland, orders were sent to the brigades of Robertson and Jones, which had been left to guard the passes of the Blue Ridge, to rejoin the army without delay, and it was expected that General Stuart, with the remainder of his command, would soon arrive. In the exercise of discretion given him when Longstreet and Hill marched into Maryland, General Stuart would be able, by route, to place himself on our right flank and time to keep us properly advised on the enemy's movements. He marched from Salem on the night of June 24th, intending to pass west of Centerville, but found the enemy's forces so disturbed as to render the route impracticable. Adhering to his original plan, he forced his way to make a wide detour through Buckland and Brentsville and cross Occoquan at Wolf Run Shoals on the morning of the 27th, continuing his march through Fairfax Courthouse and Drainesville. He arrived at the Potomac below the mouth of the Seneca Creek in the evening. He found the river much swollen by the recent rains, but after the great exertion gained Maryland shores before midnight with his whole command. He now ascended the Federal army, which had discovered to be drawn towards the Potomac. The officers of the general staff of the army were unremittingly engaged in the duties of the respective departments, much dependent on their management and exertion. The labors of the quartermasters, commissary, and medical departments were more than usually severe. The inspector generals were also laboriously occupied in the attentions to the troops, both on the march and in the camp, and officers and engineers showed skill and judgment in expediting the passage of the river and streams, the swollen condition of which, by almost continuous rains, called for extraordinary exertion. The chief of ordnance and his assistants are entitled to praise for the care and watchfulness given to the ordnance trains and the ammunition of the army, which in a long march and in many conflicts were always at hand and accessible to the troops. My thanks are due to the personal staff for their constant aid afforded me at all times, on the march and in the field, and their willingly discharge of every duty. There were captured at Gettysburg nearly 7,000 prisoners, of whom about 1,500 were paroled, and the remainder brought to Virginia. 7 pieces of artillery were also secured. I forward herewith the report of the corps, division, and other commanders mentioned in the accompanying schedule, together with maps of the scene of operation and one showing routes pursued by the army, respectively.
All right, so
Robert E. Lee,
like I said,
Commanding
first
General,
let me say, if
Army
you are from the South,
of Northern Virginia.
I swear I'm not trying to make fun of you or your accent. I was just trying to change it up. You know, I did a very basic voice for Meade, and I am the only one. I am the editor. I am the writer. I am everything for this channel still. So, you know, we're still trying to get up there that I could hire an editor and such, but I am the only person on this channel right now, so I'm doing my best. But as you see, guys, that was Lee's report with a quarter of it pulled out. Again, I pulled out the quarter about Stuart's actions from the Potomac to the Susquehanna all the way to Battle of East Cavalry Field. So you get a general view of everything from Lee's perspective. Again, I'm going to try to get those books at some point. Maybe I can find copies of them.
of the actual battle reports. Because what actually happened is, and this is what happens to this day, and if you ever see the show Band of Brothers, it shows us great when Winters gets promoted to an executive officer position. You need to write a detailed documentation of what happened. So what these books I'm describing are, it is a detailed documentation, Union and Confederate, from the regimental, actually it might be from the company, no, it's regimental, from the regiment all the way up to Meade and Lee's reports. So it's a very interesting thing to see their perspective, see what was going on. And that's what this was. This was to show, you know, Meade and Lee. These aren't just characters, and these aren't just people we read about. Well, let me go back to what I was saying. They're not characters in a book. These were real guys that were dealing with real stuff. So that's why I wanted to do this, because I wanted to show you their perspectives, what they were going through. And, you know, even Lee, you see, he admits to mistakes. He admits that, oh, well, maybe this was done not the way I thought it was going to happen. You know, it shows his own hubris on the first day ending, and then even on the second day, how he was sure he would win the next day. It's a very good way to get perspective. And that's very important when analyzing history, and that's why I'm happy I decided to do these two videos on Lee and Meade. I just really wish Meade wrote a more detailed telling of it. But also, when Meade wrote this, it was in the middle of the, I believe, Mine Run campaign, whereas Lee wrote this in winter quarters of 1863. So, well, 1863 to 1864. But thank you so much for joining me today, friends. I really hope you enjoyed it. Like I told you, I want to dive more into Gettysburg. I really enjoy Gettysburg. It's one of my favorite subjects to study. Me and my brother, we could literally tell you everything about Gettysburg. We've been going there since we were little. You know, my brother has been going there since he was like 5. I've been going there. You know, they were going there before I was even born. And here we are today. So thank you so much for joining us. Please like, share, and comment if you enjoyed the video. If you didn't enjoy the video, that's cool. Still like, share, and comment. Why not? I don't know what it's going to hurt. It helps me out. But if you are returning to the channel and not yet subscribed, or you're a new viewer, I please ask you to hit that red subscribe button and please join this ever-growing history community. Thank you so much for your time, folks, and we will definitely see you in the next one.